for joining us for today's Ipsos webinar, Exploring Patient-First Insights to Drive Innovation. Today's discussion will feature several guest panelists, including the CEO from MEDRhythms. And you can read more about our speakers on the slide in front of you. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Steve Reeves, Vice President with Ipsos's Social Intelligence Analytics team. Steve, you have the floor.
Awesome, thanks, Ellen. And thank you so much to everybody who's in attendance today. We are very, very excited to bring this panel to you, and personally very excited to introduce to you Brian Harris, who is the CEO of MEDRhythms. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about his background and MEDRhythms as an organization. I've known Brian for quite a long time and just very, very excited to convey what they're doing from a patient-centric product design standpoint. We also have on the line Dr. Alex Pantelliet from Johns Hopkins University, who is a world-renowned expert in neuroscience. We are privileged to have him. Thank you so much, Dr. Alex. We also have Lindsay Santiago, who is part of the Patient Advisory Board on MEDRhythms, and also Alexis Anderson, who is our principal, focusing on patient-centric design and innovation within Ipsos. We are, again, really, really excited. I'm going to start this by kicking it off and letting Brian set the stage for what MEDRhythms is, telling us a little bit about your story, and then we'll get into it. So Brian, take it away.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you everybody for having us. It's an honor to be here, and anytime we get an opportunity to share the journey that we're on at MEDRhythms, it's always an honor for me to do so. So I appreciate you here and letting us tell the story, and it's certainly an honor to be here with Alex and Lindsay, who have been integral to really driving MEDRhythms to where we are now as parts of our patient and scientific advisory boards. But I'm the co-founder and CEO, as you mentioned, and I'm a board-certified music therapist by training, and I have advanced training in the neuroscience of music, and specifically how that can be applied through an application that's called neurologic music therapy. And I started my career at Spaulding Rehab Hospital in Boston, which is the Harvard Medical School affiliate for neurorehab hospitals, where I actually built their program. I was their first music therapist, treating patients with live music interventions, all based upon this fundamental neuroscience of how music could improve functional outcomes in things like movement, language, and cognition. And after I started that program, very quickly after starting the program, what we were finding is that patients were getting better faster with greater results. And we now had the neuroscience to not only explain how this was possible, but also how we could standardize and replicate it. So we were treating patients across diagnoses, from stroke to brain injury, MS, PD, rare brain diseases, and really just seeing some very compelling and exciting results. And very quickly after I started that program, because of these results, the demand for my services, both from physicians who are writing orders for me to see their patients within the hospitals, but also from patients and their family members who are saying, you know, Brian, you helped my dad walk again. How do I get more of this when I leave the hospital? And at the time, the answer really was, you know, there's nothing you can do. As you can imagine, there aren't many people trained to do this work in the world, let alone to meet the needs that we were seeing. And that was an awful conversation for me to have with patients and their family members on a regular basis. As a clinician, you know, we exist, you know, my draw to the work was to make an impact and to help patients. And being able to sit in those rooms and say, there's nothing you can do from here was an awful conversation to have. Where we were focusing most of our energy there was around an intervention that's called rhythmic auditory stimulation, which is the use of music and specifically rhythm to improve functional outcomes in walking. So being able to improve things like gait speed, symmetry, overall control, and just to help people improve their walking, therefore their independence. And we were seeing that this was a really big unmet need in the world of neurology across neurodisease and injury, that many, many patients were left with these deficits. And my sort of draw to entrepreneurship and my draw to building innovation and this company around MEDRhythms was really around this mission of trying to figure out how do we bring this important care that we were seeing in the clinic to people around the world that we believe not only need it, but deserve to have access to it. And so as I was a clinician treating patients, I saw the need. I saw that we could potentially have a solution to the need. And therefore, I felt like I had a responsibility to do something about it. And that was really my journey into building MedRhythms, was really around this feeling of responsibility. And so we built MedRhythms to build a digital therapeutics platform. So these are products that are evidence-based, so they go through rigorous clinical trials, regulated by the FDA, and prescribed or prescription products that consist of hardware, software, and music. With the underlying, as we call it, the mechanism of action, the reason why this works is the deep neuroscience of how rhythm can engage the motor system. And so we built this platform that can be utilized in the home setting autonomously without the need of a clinician present, so that we can bring rhythmic auditory stimulation, this important intervention to improve walking, essentially to anybody around the world that needs it and deserves it. And as I said, it's an honor for me to have our team members and Lindsay and Alex here as well. And also, as we think about patient in the loop innovation, that's one of the things that I'm actually most proud of as building the organization, is that since day one, patient perspective, patient care has always been the central domain by which we make decisions as an organization. And we were the first digital therapeutics company to actually build a patient advisory board alongside our scientific advisory board to help us think about product innovation. So thanks again for having me, Steve. It's an honor to be here.
And that's a fantastic segue in relation to the patient advisory board and also to the physician advisory board. Lindsay, if you could introduce yourself to the audience, we would love to hear about your journey with MedRhythms and your journey from what I understand, the very first user of MedRhythms product. And then Dr. Alex, if you could also introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background. It is, it's not often that we're able to get physicians of your esteem and caliber on the line. It's great to have you, and would love to hear from you a little bit about your background. Go ahead, Lindsay.
All right, thank you, Steve. And it's an honor to be here today to share my experience with MedRhythms. I'm a person living with MS. I was diagnosed February of 2010, and kind of regular diagnosis, and transitioning, having gait issues, but I saw my personal trainer and did all things, and it was a wonderful thing. We saw Brian on Chronicle, a local show, showing what music therapy could do. And I said, that is amazing. I want to try that. And so I'm lucky enough to live near Spalding Rehab Hospital and was able to come there in person and do some of the outpatient. This was back in 2016. I just had my son a few months earlier, and I was hooked from the beginning. And kind of what Brian was saying, as far as, I think it's one of the most powerful forms of rehab that there is, and to be able to get that to the masses is so important. I feel so blessed and lucky that I was able to get it and have continued to use it, and to be able to share it, I think is just extraordinary. So I think it was in the fall of 2016, Brian, if I'm wrong, let me know, that I actually got to try the first ever device in my apartment in Boston, and put it on my shoe and give it a go. And it's just it's been amazing to see the evolution and the growth of the product, and seeing how it's transformed, because I really believe that it's such an important tool as far as recovery wise, and to be able to get it to people all over the country that aren't as fortunate to have a music therapist in their backyard, excuse me. I think it's just really fantastic. And I think also another important things for MedRhythms is that they did bring the patient in from the beginning. I think that's so important because we are the experts. You can build create a drug and say it's going to work, but if the patient doesn't want to take it because of the way it's administered, et cetera, you kind of lose out. And so to bring the patient in from the the get-go, I think is just such an important thing to do. I currently I'm the development associate, the Accelerated Cure Project for MS, and iconquerms.org, where we show the value of patient-reported outcomes and getting the patient's voice and sharing that. And it's just to see MedRhythms doing that as well, in getting the data and providing it to people, I think is just wonderful. And can't say, I'm one of MedRhythms' biggest fans. And I think what you do is so powerful, and I'm so excited to be able to see where it goes from here. So.
She said that she's one of MedRhythms' biggest fan. I actually happen to know she has a T-shirt that says MedRhythms number 1 fan. So
Nice.
It is official. It is official. It's not just recorded music, it is live music as well. And they're all extremely talented. And I feel bad for the therapists that have to hear me singing along to the music. I am not at that level of skill, but yeah, just fantastic.
So, awesome to hear your background. Dr. Pantelli, I would love to hear from you.
Well, let me just start off by saying that it's truly my pleasure to be here on this panel today. I feel really inspired just now hearing Lindsay's and Brian's stories. It's been a while since I've heard Brian's story. We've been working together for a number of years, and I really do believe in the mission and what MedRhythms is currently doing and will continue to do. I'm at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. I'm a movement disorders neurologist, and as such, my work has focused on diagnosis and management of patients with various illnesses that affect movement, particularly Parkinsonian disorders, the most common of which is Parkinson disease. And really, it's in that role that I am here to speak with you today. I was privileged to co-found and now direct the Johns Hopkins Center for Music and Medicine, which began as an initiative in 2015, and I'm proud to say has grown over the last few years in particular. So our mission is to use music and rhythm to help heal a variety of illnesses, both neurological and non-neurological. So to use music as medicine, if you will. And the way that MedRhythms work fits in within the mission of our center is that we now understand that we need to use precision music medicine in order to target an individual patient's symptoms and therefore be able to maximize the improvement that can be achieved. So the MedRhythms product that we're currently testing in patients with Parkinson's disease along with Boston University aims to achieve exactly that. You heard a little bit earlier in the introduction from Brian about rhythmic auditory stimulation. This is a technique that has been used for Parkinson's disease since the 1970s. And there is a lot more research to be done, but what hasn't been done until the study we're doing now is adaptive rhythmic auditory stimulation, where you could use sensors worn in a patient's shoe to detect specific gait patterns and change the music and the rhythm that the patient is walking to in a way that will optimize that patient's improvement. And ultimately, one of our key goals is to prevent falls in patients with Parkinson's disease, stroke, multiple sclerosis, other illnesses that affect gait. And it is very much my hope that going forward in larger trials, we'll be able to demonstrate that that will be the case.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know that you're currently in trial right now, Brian. One of the things that I'm so intrigued by with this is the concept of personalized medicine. And I'm going a little bit off script here, but thinking about the application that music has and the individualism when it comes to someone's preference in music, and dovetailing that with the concept of personalized medicine, for me is just such a unique thing. And I personally am just such a big fan, having seen how product development is done outside of pharma and healthcare, when I was early on in my career to right now, where there's actually a lot that can be learned and is being learned and applied from non-healthcare environments when you put the consumer in the center of the design equation. Dr. Alex, I had a question for you, if that's all right. As a neuroscientist, why is the science behind MEDRhythms so compelling? If you could talk a little bit about that, both in terms of obviously Parkinson's, but what it might mean for other indications down the road.
Well, the key aspect of what we're talking about and how MEDRhythms devices are helpful is through this concept of rhythmic entrainment, which is a way to use external beats, external rhythm, with or without melody, in fact, to influence the way that person's heart rate, brain waves are firing. And so this has been demonstrated in the last several decades through several different studies. For example, using electroencephalography, scalp EEG, in healthy participants who are listening to different rhythms, different beats. And it's remarkable that typically within just a few minutes, a person's brain waves, when you're looking at both hemispheres in a broad swath of the brain and its activity, and you average across, and the beat of the EEG, if you will, aligns exactly with the beat that is being heard from the outside. Biologically, we are designed to be sensitive to temporal changes, time-based changes, and a lot of biological processes in humans and animals are designed that way. The 24-hour clock that's embedded in our brain, when to be awake, when to be more active, when to be asleep. When it comes to walking, that's a great example of where you are rhythmic normally without having to think about it. Now, unfortunately, in diseases like MS, illnesses like stroke and Parkinson's disease, that natural rhythm becomes disrupted because of pathways in the brain that are being damaged for one reason or another. And what external auditory cues, sound cues, can do is help patients restore that rhythm over time. And it's remarkable that this could be observed very quickly. We have seen this with our patients with atypical Parkinsonian disorders that on average are much more severe than Parkinson's disease. And we have a manuscript we'll be submitting shortly showing that this simple metronome-based technique can actually help, not all, but some of these patients, if appropriately targeted to their own walking pace. And so again, coming back to adaptive rhythmic auditory stimulation, which is what we're trialing using a MEDRhythms device, we are very hopeful that by walking for as little as about 25-30 minutes, 5 days a week at home, you will see meaningful changes and improvements in the walking pattern of our patients with Parkinson's disease when they listen to songs that have a nice strong beat and try to align their steps to the beat that they're hearing.
That's awesome. I've always wondered if if there's differences by genre, right? I'm a country music fan, is there an application for that? So interesting to hear what the BPMs might be for different indications. Brian, would love to hear from you about, well, first of all, there's been so much positive news about MEDRhythms, obviously with some of the partnerships that you have in flight. Would love to hear about the partnerships, but first would love to hear about how the clinical trial is going. And from your standpoint, as a pioneer in digital therapeutics, I look at you, and a lot of people look at MEDRhythms as this bright spot in the digital therapeutics landscape, and one that is really, really on the leading edge of how to create an impactful digital therapeutics product. Can you talk a little bit about the process for staging this to eventually bring it to market from a clinical trial standpoint? And then would love to hear about the really interesting partnerships that you have with Universal Music, with several others. So.
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Steve. It's a robust question. And as we think about the process of bringing these things to market, and I think the theme here is that it takes partners. We will not be successful in silos, right? And so we need to work together both internally as a team and externally as a team as well to really see industry level success. And so, as we think about early stage clinical trials, it's most important when we think about success long term, the products have to work, and the products have to have clinical benefits to the patients that we're serving. And so we spent the early years, you heard Lindsay talk about the fall of 2016, and she had a very, very early version of product, but thinking about getting the product development right and really focusing on clinical development. Like, how do we get the science right? How do we get the product right that can create an intervention to create an outcome? The beauty of the science, which Alex mentioned, that has been around since about the 1970s, about how you can use an external rhythm to engage systems within the brain, is that it's applicable. It's human neuroscience. It's about music perception and production in the human brain, which is applicable to nearly every person on Earth, regardless of their brain injury or not. And so we built a platform that we could launch different products in different disease states over time that could be personalized and customized to every individual within those disease states. And so we spent a lot of time setting up these clinical trials. We're going to be finishing up our pivotal trial in chronic stroke very soon, which is an 8-site randomized control trial. And we have 6 other ongoing clinical trials with Alex and PD. We're working with Cleveland Clinic and MS. We have a neuroimaging study coming up. So we're really focusing at first, fundamentally, product needs to impact patients' lives, right? But in a new industry such as digital therapeutics, there's novel ways to think about getting through regulatory approvals and thinking about commercialization for products that really, and thinking about reimbursement, which has never been done before. And so, there's a lot of, I think we all understand the complexity of the healthcare ecosystem. And so when you're building a new company, particularly in a new industry where there aren't precedents, each one of those avenues is, a mountain to climb that may be a little bit different than other, existing industries. And so, we're working with a lot of partners in each one of those domains. But specifically, you mentioned about the partnership with Universal Music Group, which is something that was really, a very exciting moment for MEDRhythms. And obviously, as a musician myself, the partnership was announced in Rolling Stone, right? So how cool is as a musician, not only quoted in Rolling Stone, but what an honor it was to be telling this story about the power of music in this way to that audience, which was awesome. But this really comes back to partly what you said about your ideas and thinking about personalizing a medical intervention with personalized music and music that they like. What we know about the neuroscience of this even is that your brain functionally responds better to music that you like. E.g., we can likely get greater outcomes doing rhythmic auditory stimulation if we can do that with preferred music. Awesome. Also, we think about, like, in order for patients to use the product, they need to be able to engage. They need to be motivated to do it. There's probably a motivational value to being able to use that music. And so our partnership with Universal Music Group is quite robust, but one of the biggest pieces of it is that we get access to nearly their entire catalog of music, which is about 50%, nearly 50% of the world's music. They have the biggest country music label, Steve. So, we can literally, and what our platform does is we can take any piece of music that a patient likes to listen to, and then we can mix it. Think about it like a sort of a healthcare DJ. We can mix the music to make it therapeutically valuable to that patient in the moment. And so that's what gets really exciting about this partnership. And it's the first of its kind partnership in either healthcare or the music industry. And so, I think we all raise each other, but it doesn't happen in silos.
Great response. And I was sharing the link to the Rolling Stone article here a couple of days ago, and people were like pretty mesmerized by it. Like, that's beyond bucket list, I think. It was like nobody has it on their bucket list to do that, and that's pretty awesome. Lindsay, I would love to hear about your role on the patient advisory board and how that's helping to shape how decisions are made at MEDRhythms and your involvement there. Would love to get your perspective on, basically your role within that, in that setting, and how it's impacting MEDRhythms.
Sure, Steve. So the patient advisory board was set up probably, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, like maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And it's, really looking at the patients and what we, and from MS to Parkinson's to stroke, and really seeing, what is useful, what do you need to provide for people, how are you going to use it, what's going to make it intriguing for you to use, because as I kind of alluded to before, like, you can have a product that's fantastic, but if there's something about that product that the end user is not going to want to do, then
Right.
it's, it's not. And MEDRhythms has really come with us from the ground up and saying, okay, what do you think of this? Do you think people would use it, would like it from this? And being able to, as a patient and as someone who's done music therapy for quite a while now, to provide that feedback has been wonderful, and to meet such other fantastic people that are inspirational, and just see how music has touched their lives as well. And I think it's just incredibly important to have the patient voice there, and for the product. And I talk a lot about too is, as a patient, you need to be your best advocate for yourself, and being able to get access to this type of treatment, I think is one of the things. And to be able to now, I have friends with MS in Colorado and different states and things like that, and soon going to be able to tell them, like, this product you'll be able to use no matter where you are, and having MEDRhythms guide that process.
Great. It's great. Alexis, I don't think I've asked you a question yet, but I do want to ask you a question. You are embedded within the landscape, if you will. Your perspective, having worked with other digital therapeutics companies, and even on the pharma and medtech side of the house, where we're starting to get questions from, a gamut of individuals, heads of market research to heads of digital therapeutics, and what's going on in this space and what's our perspective of it. I would love to hear, from your standpoint, what you're seeing, and then what is the key difference maybe from what you've seen in others versus what we're seeing in MEDRhythms. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. And so, I work in our kind of patient engagement team here at Ipsos. I also sort of work in digital health. And so my life's work is really around making sure that we're helping clients bring, the right solutions to the right patients in a more faster and kind of efficient manner. And so, a lot of the work that I do with our clients tends to focus around helping them update or refine their strategy for how they're going to, better kind of bring patient engagement to the center of everything they do. I'll help them evaluate partnerships, new opportunities, and then, bringing that inside to the internal workings of an organization. So kind of making the rubber hit the road there. So I'm personally so inspired and motivated by this MEDRhythms, what MEDRhythms has been able to accomplish, because I think it's just such a beautiful case study almost of how true patient-centric engagement, innovation, how it works. And it's, I wrote down a couple of things here that just kind of stuck out to me as, lessons learned or kind of opportunities for the industry. And I think first thing that came to mind for me was this importance of really starting with patient needs. So, for example, you'd think of someone with a neurological condition, and you think maybe if they're able to walk, that's good enough, but it's really not. And I think Brian really touched on that really well. There's this emotional component of being able to walk well and being able to get from one place to another. It's not just this physical component, but it's also this emotional, and it's not just on the patient side of things. It's also from the healthcare provider saying, sorry, that's as good as it's going to get. I'm so thrilled that, with this story with MEDRhythms, it was about not just stopping there, but kind of going forward, because it's something that really mattered to clinicians and patients to kind of address it. And I think another kind of key takeaway for me from this is, sometimes the best innovations are things that are right in front of us. And it's because those are the things that are easiest for patients to adopt. For example, music, it's, something that people want to listen to anyways. And if there's a way to turn that into medicine and we lower that threshold to adoption, it's just, incredible. And applying that kind of on a digital scale, helping us, reach people no matter where they are, I think it just makes the playing field so much more equitable and accessible, which is something we really need in healthcare right now. I wrote down a couple other things, which I'll just kind of maybe mention one or two, which is, I think this is a really great example of pivoting and kind of being agile. And I loved what Brian kind of mentioned. And of course, Lindsay, you'll probably be able to speak to this, better than anyone, but this evolution of the product over time. So bringing something to market, but then staying nimble, staying agile, talking to patients about what's working, what's not working well, and being able to kind of, start from scratch again to kind of make those improvements incrementally over time. And, 2016 to now is, given what MEDRhythms is accomplishing, it's not that long of a time frame for, what is truly, incredible innovation right now. So I'd be curious myself, Lindsay, if you could speak to the evolution that you've seen from those early days to now.
I mean, it's quite dramatic. It was a little chip that went on my shoe, and Owen had a computer, and trying to like figure out is it recording, is it not, to now having, you get a phone and there's special headset and you put this on your left foot and this on your right foot, and it's night and day. And I can also speak to I'm very excited for the partnership as well with the library of music that's to come, because as I think it was either Brian you said or Steve, but like if you're a country guy, if there's no country music, you're not gonna like want to do it. I tested the product, but as Brian knows, it's probably not the music that I really listen to right now on the device. So when things evolve, I'll be able to have that opportunity to use the music that really speaks to me, and then therefore I'm gonna want to do more, working on it and things like that. It'll be more enjoyable. I'll see more progress, hopefully, and it's kind of that circle. But yeah, it's just amazing how you can start with an idea and kind of see it all the way through. It's really remarkable. So absolutely. I didn't know what it was when I, 6 years ago. I'm like, what are they doing? I don't really get it. Okay, you want me to put this in my okay.
I remember, so I remember sitting in, MEDRhythms at one point, like early on, was in a co-working space, not too far from their corporate office right now, but I was in there, I was working, alongside them, and I know Owen and I know Brian, and just to see, I remember, I think it was 5 years ago, just to see the excitement like that was in the room. Like you guys were, I think you were working on some of the gate training for the platform. I remember talking to one of your data scientists, and it's just apart from digital therapeutics and innovation in the healthcare space, it's actually a really amazing story for the state of Maine as well, which is obviously where Brian and I reside. Right, there we go, up there. Yeah, tried to point to it. It serves a purpose back there. Brian,
but
talk
it's
a
also,
little bit.
I think also a testament to the fact that like Lindsay was willing to keep coming back because early days of product, when we talk about building mobile products, right? Mobile product. Our mobile product was a netbook that you carried. It was literally a computer that you carried with these awful sensors that like sporadically collected data, and the music that people were listening to were literally these awful MIDI files. Like it was really, really, really bad, but it was what we needed to prove a concept, right?
Exactly.
And so we're very lucky that Lindsay like had that experience and said, hey, I'll try this again over time.
That's awesome. Okay. That was in the summer in Maine, right? Not in the winter.
Yeah,
in Maine.
exactly.
Brian, how do you, when you think about, and I think about this from time to time, like getting from point A to point B to point C, we just talked about building an MVP, 6 years ago, a minimum viable product. When you think about scale, where do you want to take it? Tell us your vision. Like, we would love to hear it. So.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we started this company purely with the mission of helping people that need help. And what we fundamentally believe deserve to have the highest quality of care. I think that anybody that has a walking deficit should have best in class services provided to them. And we saw firsthand the impact that this could make. And so when we think about our vision and our scale, it's bringing this to every single person that has a walking deficit. I mean, obviously there's a vision and there's an execution, right? So the vision is bringing this to every single person that has a walking deficit around the world. You know, walking deficits don't just happen in the US, right? This is a global problem. These walking deficits impact nearly every aspect of somebody's life: quality of life, their independence, fall risk, safety, right? The feeling, a self-efficacy feeling of safety and independence and these types of things around the world. And so we're hyper-focused right now, obviously, on the US first. We have to be to execute there to do this well. But our vision is that this is something that we can bring to the world because the world needs it.
Awesome.
I think that's a great point, and I'd love to. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is that I think is another kind of key lesson when I think about MEDRhythms is this kind of willingness to depart from kind of traditional expectations, traditional processes, and in some ways it's sort of forging a path in a new way. And so I'm personally curious, you know, for myself, Brian, Dr. Pantelia, Lindsay, your sort of perspective. So how is kind of this partnership that you have with MEDRhythms, you know, Brian, from your perspective, the partnerships that you have externally, have you come across any challenges with this kind of new way of working together? You know, how have you, you know, gone forward, and what kind of lessons learned do you feel like you're taking away from your experiences, you know, together?
I'm happy to start, and they would welcome their thoughts. Yes, there are challenges across every aspect of the organization in terms of, as I mentioned, healthcare is very difficult, and I don't think that we can lie to ourselves without explicitly acknowledging bringing a product to market in healthcare is hard. It's hard to do. There's so many things that you have to get right. You have to get the product right. You have to get the clinical trials right. You have to get the FDA right. You have to get the doctors right in terms of prescribing. You have to get reimbursement right. There's so much that has to align to have the success that we've talked about and that we've dreamed of, right? And so in every aspect of that, there's been challenges. Our approach, though, to offset those challenges has been, we acknowledged that on day one in 2016, that this was going to be really hard, so that when they happened, we weren't going to be surprised by them. And then with that frame of mind, you can keep your blinders on and hyper-focused at each stage of what you need to do to overcome them. And then we fundamentally believe that you don't overcome them without creativity and help. So we know that, like everything, even our partnership with Universal, like that's a very novel type of partnership that we had to get really creative to figure out how that was going to work, right? Yeah. In from product development, we had to get really creative to figure out how we're going to put a therapist in a box, in an app, and a product and send it to people, right? So, but these are not like we were sitting in a room by ourselves drawing on a whiteboard, right? I mean, we were talking with Alex, we were talking with Lindsay, we were talking with the folks at Universal, we were talking with all our clinical trial sites to say, how can we do this together, and how does this make most sense to the world? So, yes, lots of challenges.
Yeah. Lindsay, Dr. Pantelia, any thoughts?
Sure. I have to say that from the get-go, the process from my standpoint of interacting with Brian and with others in the MEDRhythms organization has been rather smooth. You know, the day-to-day challenges of any clinical trial, which is something that I've come to expect over the years, are there. But, you know, thus far, I don't know if you could call it a challenge, the main feedback from our study participants has been that they wish the music were a little different. Kind of to Steve's point about country, it seems that with the partnership that has been concluded with Universal Music Group, that should be going away in the next iteration of the product. And other than that, you know, the product is easy to use, the one we're using in our trial for Parkinson's disease. To illustrate that, the first person who tried it, besides for me, when we got it shipped to us, was my 3-year-old son, and he didn't want to take off the headphones. He really enjoyed it. It seemed like he entrained to the beat reasonably well. I think I mentioned this to Brian early on, and so that's a very good illustration of what needs to happen. People with Parkinson's disease, people with stroke, with multiple sclerosis, suffer not only from movement difficulties, but there are emotional and cognitive challenges as well. So ease of use is particularly relevant if you're talking about a segment of the population, age 65 and older, which is the vast majority of patients with Parkinson's disease. So I think that box is checked successfully with a product we're currently trialing, and that's very important. And the day-to-day, week-to-week interactions, we have constant interactions with our study participants per the protocol of our trial. That's a 360-degree loop, because we are in touch with MEDRhythms and people on their side to make sure the data are being uploaded appropriately, and they're in turn sharing their feedback with us from the data that are collected from our participants. So it's a constant iterative process, and that's very important. Just to step back, one thing that I've been hearing, which I really feel we need to emphasize, is that music-based interventions and rhythm-based interventions will never be a one-size-fits-all. Mm-hmm. It's something that we really need to emphasize. There's still this kind of, in the among the general public, this mistaken sense maybe Mozart is gonna cure everybody. Well, my background is as a classical violinist. I share a birthday with Mozart, which is kind of random, but I happen to love his music. But I know that that's not going to cure everyone with Parkinson's disease or anything else. Some people might like Mozart, might like walking to Mozart. That's not going to be most people. So adaptive and individualized approaches, which is exactly what MEDRhythms is trying to do, are absolutely crucial, because that's going to maximize the impact of these therapies, which really can be a powerful way of helping people walk better. From an emotional standpoint, there's a lot of improvement to be seen, and perhaps even from the cognitive standpoint.
Dr. Alex, I have to ask, as a trained violinist, have you ever gotten your hands on a Stradivarius? That's the question that I have.
I've come close, but no cigar so far, Steve. Sorry to tell you.
Fair play, fair play.
I have one last question, kind of related to the same kind of idea of feedback and personalization, and maybe like Lindsay, you're the best person to weigh in on this. So right now, I hear clients come to me all the time and they say, we want this patient input, we want patient feedback, and that's great, because we do need to have the personalization, that iterative kind of approach. I guess maybe this is a question for both Lindsay and Brian. How do you balance that need so Lindsay, for example, on your end, to want to provide input, to want to provide feedback without having it be burdensome to yourself and kind of your day-to-day life? And Brian, how did you go about trying to strike that balance as well? So you want the input, you want the feedback from end to end, but how do you make it so that it's enjoyable for everyone, including you?
You want me to go first, Brian?
Sure.
All right. Well, I feel honored anytime I get to kind of give my input, and I feel it's important for the whole kind of MS community, as well as myself being able to provide that that information, especially if it's useful and helpful. And saying starting this 6 year, I will try almost anything as long as it's fairly safe. And I think it's just so important to get the feedback to hopefully then help others. So that's just my personality, that the more I can do, the more I can help others, whether it's, telling Brian what I think of the product, whether it's, talking with someone newly diagnosed, anything kind of like that, I'm willing to do. And I feel like MEDRhythms and other, companies do know that there's like a balance. Like there's only so, there's so much feedback that can be provided and given, and we can do as much as we can. It's not, kind of like a daily thing. It's every couple of months, or sometimes there's more focus and then it backs off because you give your feedback and then work needs to happen from that. So it's not a constant. But personally, the more I can provide my input and feedback, I feel honored to do that, to hopefully, help myself and hopefully help others as well.
Makes sense. And I love what you just said there. You know, sometimes you provide your feedback and there's a pause because work needs to be done. And like hearing you have that confidence that what you gave feedback on is going to change is so powerful, you know, for me to hear. And I think a great takeaway as well. Thanks, Brian. Over to you.
Yeah, so we have, yeah, your cue, sorry.
Oh, no, it's good. One of the things that's really interesting about even just thinking about that is I have never felt that the feedback was burdensome. I mean, we want to help. So I want to hear what patients have to say, good or bad, about the products so that we can make it better. I think also our goal as an organization is when we ask for feedback, whether it's officially through our patient advisory board or through lots of other people living with MS, PD, stroke, that we're also providing value to their lives as well. Right? Like, so what can we do as an organization that you're not just giving us like feedback, but how can we make this mutually beneficial? But the other thing that's really interesting that we have found is that people want to help. You know, one of the things that I learned as a clinician is that people want their stories heard. People want to feel like they're integrated in part of the product because they have felt so disintegrated from the healthcare system throughout their journey. And so people are very willing to and want to give their feedback. I think the larger challenge is just the setting the expectation of based upon feedback, what is possible now versus what is possible in future, right? So we can't take every piece of feedback and make that a feature of the application tomorrow, but also just aligning those expectations of what is our process and where does this go from here is really important.
Fantastic. We're getting close to end of time. We got 10 minutes and I've got a slew of questions that have come in. I'm going to go through them and try to find the ones that we can probably answer now, and then we'll take the others offline because they might require a little bit more detail than I am able to orchestrate in this 10 minutes. The first thing well, first of all, people want a demo. So is there a plan to demo this somewhere?
Well, yes. I mean, we are coming up on a you know, hopefully later this year on a commercialization of a product, by which leading up to that, you know, there will be lots of opportunities for demos, videos of demos and how product works and things that we will make public. So soon.
Awesome.
Though I will say, always welcome. I mean, in this process, we have an opportunity to engage end users, people that may actually use it for feedback. So if there are folks either in the audience or people that know people that are living with stroke, walking deficits, etc., we have opportunities for them to be involved now in giving us this continuous product feedback.
Awesome. Next question, can the technology differentiate between shuffling steps and distinct steps? Oh, cool. Great question.
Yeah, it's interesting because the data that we are collecting from it's very high fidelity gait data. So it comes from ankle worn sensors, which in the world of motion analysis is basically where you can get the highest fidelity of data from wearable sensors, is from the ankle. We get about 40 data points for every quote unquote step that a patient takes. Now, I would say there's certainly outliers, meaning there's presentations of gait parameters, people who take very, very fast shuffling steps, that's difficult to distinguish, and people who take very, very slow steps, that's difficult to distinguish just from the state of motion sensing technology right now. However, when we think about people who have a festinating gait pattern that, my mind goes, you know, to Dr. Panteliot's world of Parkinson's disease, we've seen fairly good ability to detect when this happens and to detect these steps and be able to respond when that happens, you know, given the fact that, you know, there is outliers to that as well.
Makes complete sense. We have time for a couple more questions. So one is, are there plans, is it possible now, or are there plans for the data to go directly to the clinician?
Yes, so it's so this is also part of our rapid feedback loop, which is with physicians about what data do they need, do they want, do they care about? Because what we don't want is to burden the prescriber with more processes or dashboards or data that they don't want. And so we are doing rapid testing of this now to figure out what does that data look like. In early days, it's likely a sheet that the patient can take to the clinician to give them the feedback on their progress of how often they were doing the walking, how their speed changed, or how their symmetry changed over time. We will get smarter about that as we get farther along in the process.
Awesome. Another question that came in, can the gait data be tracked over a treadmill as well as over the ground, or is it ground only?
I get asked this question a lot, actually, so it's a good question. So the intervention itself, rhythmic auditory stimulation, can be done in tandem with a treadmill. However, product itself, if you think about how a treadmill works, particularly for people who have gait deficits, the purpose is to move the feet for the patient. So you're on a track, your foot moves. You have to walk at the speed that the track is moving, right? Like you have to be able to do that. So there has to be a synchronization between the auditory input and the movement of the track. So current version of product is not synchronized that way. I mean, that would be a literal different product, right? So we don't encourage people to do this on a treadmill because we are independently trying to drive neuromotor control. So we're trying to drive a change in speed by virtue of a neurologic input, not by moving the ground underneath them. So the two working at the same time would be dissonant. But science could work there.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think that's all the questions that we have time for today. For other questions, we'll make sure to get you a response via email through one of us. Any last parting comments, thoughts from the panel? First and foremost, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. My goodness, such a pleasure to be able to speak with everybody. Any closing thoughts or comments from the group?
Just to piggyback on something that Lindsay was saying before, two key aspects of what any successful medical grade product needs to have is safety, and it needs to be reasonably enjoyable to use if you're talking about a digital therapeutic. And I think that, again, with our experience so far working with MEDRhythms, the product checks both of those boxes. The enjoyment in particular is crucial because we know that it activates a shared set of regions in the brain, interconnected regions, a network of enjoyment that is the same network that is activated when you are exposed to alcohol, cocaine, heroin, other drugs of abuse, with intense enjoyment that could be coming from music that you actually like. Again, something that you really prefer and select yourself. So the reason that's important is that if you enjoy something like this over time, you're going to be more likely to keep coming back to it time and time again. And in neurorehabilitation, it's absolutely crucial to sustain and do exercises on a regular basis. So in this case, walking to a strong rhythm. So we need to do that 3, 4, 5 days a week in order to see improvement and sustain it. So that aspect of being enjoyable is absolutely crucial. And safety so far has been great as well. So that's obviously very important for any medical product.
And I'll just say thank you. Also, as I mentioned, anytime we get an opportunity to share the journey that we're on, it's always an honor to do so. And I want to thank Alex and Lindsay as well for not only their help throughout the process of building this company and really focused on our mission, but also for being here today and being willing to talk about your involvement means a lot to me, and we're honored to have you. So thank you for that.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
How about you, Lindsay? Any final thoughts, comments? I know you had mentioned maybe to us some exciting work with iConquer MS. So definitely want to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the Accelerated Care Project's initiatives, it's called iConquerMS.org. It's for people who are diagnosed with MS, but also care partners and physicians, and we really focus on hearing the voice of those who have MS by patient-reported outcomes, filling those out, as well as helping recruitment for studies. And also we have a program now that allows you to submit questions regarding either COVID-19 or symptoms related and voting on them. And it's really to help say that you have a voice in research. You know, we need to know what you're interested in, and hopefully we can figure out a way to get those projects funded, as well as just hearing the patient voice is so important. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that. And if anybody ever has any questions or anything, I think my email is available, and I'd be happy to talk.
Awesome. Anybody else before we go?
All good from my end. Thank you all so much. I just think that this is going to be so powerful for so many of the groups that I work with to hear this kind of messaging. It's just really can't be understated how important and valuable it is for the future of healthcare. So yeah, thank you all.
For me, I'm like, you know, seeing where MedRhythms has come over the last 4 or 5 years and imagining, you know, what's it going to look like in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years. I am so excited for the impact that it's going to have on patients' lives. And Brian and team, thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think that's a wrap. Audience, thank you so much for your attendance. If there are any other questions, please shoot us an email and we would be happy to respond. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.